The final chapter on JFK, Chapter 8, Segment 2, the first leg.
Welcome back. Following Kennedy's death, Lyndon Baines Johnson vehemently denied being involved with John Connally making the arrangements for John F. Kennedy's Texas trip. That was not true. And by Johnson saying that, knowing that he and Connally were the people that were put in charge, and they were the people that knew about Kennedy's trip before anybody else, although most people weren't told until weeks or days before the actual trip. By Johnson denying that, it shows that he knew that he was a prime suspect because he was involved in the planning for Kennedy's trip. At 11:50 a.m. on Thursday, November 21st, 1963, John Kennedy with Jackie arrived by helicopter from the White House to Andrews Air Force Base. And 15 minutes later, the couple, along with others, departed Andrews Air Force Base for San Antonio, Texas, for the Texas trip. The Kennedys on Air Force One arrived at the San Antonio International Airport at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, where they got in the same presidential limousine that Kennedy was in the next day, and they went and had a motorcade through the city in San Antonio. The motorcade was huge. It started out on smaller streets from the airport and got into the city of San Antonio, where Kennedy and his staff were impressed by the crowds of citizens cheering he and Jackie on. From that motorcade, the entire staff went to Brooks Air Force Base, where Kennedy spoke and dedicated a new United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine. This was all part of Kennedy's program to advance America into the future. From the Air Force Base, Kennedy returned to the San Antonio Airport and flew from San Antonio on a short flight to Houston. Air Force One touched down at the Houston International Airport. Kennedy got in a different limo and had another motorcade through the streets of Houston, where it was estimated that more than 75,000 people were lining the streets to see JFK and, of course, Jackie. From there, the Kennedys and the presidential party went to the Rice Hotel, not for a stayover, but for a freshen-up period, so they could get ready for Kennedy's speech at the Houston Coliseum that evening. But interestingly enough, when JFK heard from some of the hotel staff that there was a state banquet for LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens, rather than stay in his hotel suite, both he and his wife Jackie went to the LULAC banquet, where they spoke, and in fact, Jackie actually spoke Spanish to all of the attendees of that function. After that event, the Kennedys got in a white Lincoln limo and went to the Houston Coliseum, where John F. Kennedy gave his last large public speech. The Kennedys and the presidential party, including Johnson and Lady Bird Johnson, went to the Sam Houston Coliseum for a dinner honoring a Houston congressman and for a speech. After that, the entire party went to the Houston International Airport and departed on two separate planes, and they all flew to Fort Worth, Texas, where they landed at Carswell Air Force Base at approximately 11 p.m. The Kennedys, surprisingly, were greeted that late at night by thousands of citizens wrapped around Carswell Air Force Base. The president and his wife greeted some attendees on the field and traveled into downtown Fort Worth, getting out still in their formal attire and walking into the Texas Hotel, but not before stopping and shaking hands and talking to citizens who had surrounded the Hotel Texas, hoping for a glimpse of Kennedy and his wife. For President John F. Kennedy and Jackie, Thursday, November 21st, 1963, was a hectic but wonderful day. 3 cities, wonderful times, great memories. And when they got to the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth, late on that Thursday evening, going up to the presidential suite, they clearly were exhausted and needed some rest to get ready for the next busy day. When the Kennedys got to the Hotel Texas, and as people were getting ready for bed, Lyndon Johnson and John F. Kennedy got into a huge argument. If you remember, I talked about Kennedy and Johnson for that entire 1963 only met 1 hour and 53 minutes together. Spent 1 hour and 53 minutes alone. And the last 6 or 8 minutes that these men spent alone was fighting in the presidential suite over the seating arrangements for the next day's motorcade. Lyndon Johnson wanted his former campaign manager and good friend, John Connally, out of Kennedy's limo, and he wanted Senator Ralph Yarborough in Kennedy's car. It sounds sort of silly, grown men fighting over seating arrangements like children do when they're getting in their car as to who's going to get the front seat. But the reality is, Johnson said he could not ride with Senator Yarborough the next day. And he wanted him out of the car. Whatever reason there was, Johnson, 12 hours before the motorcade, wanted his buddy out of Kennedy's car and in the car with him, and he wanted his enemy in the car sitting where Connally ultimately sat. Now, if Johnson had gotten his way, Kennedy still would have been dead. But Senator Ralph Yarborough, who was older than Connally, might not have survived the wounds that Connally suffered. And if he would have been dead, if you can imagine this, Johnson would have stepped up to Kennedy's spot, and John Connally, governor of Texas, would have been able to step up to the senatorial position in Texas that he coveted. That makes it a very interesting point in history, doesn't it? Let's go to the next segment. See you soon.